So let's bring it up to Margie Oleson.
Thank you. I have good news, bad news. The bad news is leadership is not natural. Not the way we do it. Now, if we were in the jungle or on the savannah, we would learn from our elders, and they would have learned from their elders, and they would have learned from their elders. But here's the problem. Who are our elders? And so we've actually learned leadership by just being in the world and being around people who were leading. So our very first leaders were the people that were there when we were born. That's a frightening thought. And we didn't come with a manual, and then it just went on from there. And I was the youngest of 4, so I had leaders around me all the time. Imagine a 4-year-old teaching me how to be appropriate and how to be safe. And then we get a part-time job, or we join a music group, and the leaders are the ones leading us and teaching us just while we're sponging and learning how they talk to us and how they behave to us. That becomes the way we think about leadership. And so we go out into the world, and that's what we do. And I have a history of gravitating toward and attracting really bad bosses. So who's had a bad boss? When I see that, I'm sad. This is not how it has to be. But I didn't know that. I went through layoffs. I went through firings, more layoffs, more firings. And one time, I was a single parent. And that rocked my world. Somebody thought it was okay to just make me be vulnerable, my children, a place to live, a vehicle, insurance. I was vulnerable to that situation, and it had to do with who my bosses were and who I worked for. So all those people that are leading out there, if you think about it, how did they learn how to lead? How did they develop? Why did they get promoted? Who hires leaders? When they bring them in, what are they bringing them in for? And how are they preparing them? And let's just stipulate that the leadership role in a company is the most important role, okay? So 500 people, the CEO or the executive director is not going to check in with people, all 500, every single day. But we need them to go in the right direction. We need them to be successful, and so we put in a network of leaders, supervisors, managers, directors, VPs, and those people are responsible for the success of all the people around them, okay? But they don't know how to be a leader either. And their leader's leader does not necessarily know. And so what I found after 30 years in corporate America is we are making it up as we go along. And that's the bad news. The good news is I got curious, especially really wanting to have agency and know that I can be in charge of my day-to-day. So I went back to school maybe the way you would take apart a toaster or take a painting class, and I earned a doctorate in organization development because I wanted to understand organizations. Just went here, right up here in the road, the Minneapolis campus of the University of St. Thomas. Shock and awe, after a few years of coursework, we know how to teach leaders how to lead. We know how to teach leaders how to have effective groups. We had been working on that for 100 years, and at that point, it was 30 years of settled research and 30 years of real application that was the right thing at the right time. Now it's been more than 10 years, so now we're at over 40. What? So we go through all this coursework. They tell us we've known everything we need to know for the last 30 years, so I embarked on my dissertation journey, subtitled, "What the heck? Why are companies missing out on their single greatest strategic advantage? Why are they putting so much time and energy and resources into the things they think are going to get them where they need to go? They want revenue. They want profit. They want more clients. They want to be more successful in the marketplace. They want more government contracts. They want all of that. And when they need a lawyer, they hire a lawyer. So if someone's going to handle your legal, you're not going to give it to the buddy who majored in golf in college. You're going to insist that they went to law school, passed the bar, and maybe even have some certifications or some specialties in the area of the world that you work in. When you're going to hire for your taxes as a business, you need to be legal and you need to be on the right schedule, and you want to maximize deductions, but you want to do the phases for taxes the way they're supposed to go. You're not going to leave it up to your neighbor who's good with numbers. What we're doing, the equivalent today is we will take a social worker who is just making it happen with all of their clients and then promote them into leadership. And which part of learning to be a social worker prepared them to be a leader? So I wanted to understand what is the disconnect and why are companies getting this so wrong, because I'm pretty sure, I'd bet $1 million they want to get this right. So I embark on my research and I find out, document all the things that we know that we want to make sure we have in place for leadership and for effective groups. And I'll tell you, anything you pick up at Amazon or a bookstore, or you go to hear a speaker, or you take a class, it's all based on about the same 4 or 5 things. So they might dress it up differently or use different words, but they're just telling the same story. It's not rocket science. If I told you what it was in detail, we could talk for 3 hours and you're going to go, I know, I've heard that. We had that class. So I understood the what. Then I wanted to know, so what's the gap? What's happening in companies and organizations that they haven't figured out how to turn that information into practice? And that was fun because it is the simplest, most familiar problem. How do you go from knowing something to doing it? I wish it was more complicated than that. We're talking about complex organizations. I get it. There's all these forces happening at the same time, organisms of technology and data and people and groups and facilities and locations. But when you get those few things right that are already settled research and have been for more than 40 years, and the people that are using them are hitting it out of the park, when you get that right, that complexity gets a lot more doable. That complexity wrangles in. Now you're not herding cats, now you're being systematic. Why are we systematic with our facilities management? Hence, the lights are out, the timer went off. How are we systematic with our facilities and we are not systematic with our leadership? But then I realized it's because, think psychology, think anatomy, think neuroscience. Question, how are those New Year's resolutions going? And you did not get up yesterday morning to say, I want to mess that up again. And those people that work for you, those people that are your clients, that are leaders and the people that report to them, they're not getting up in the morning trying to be the worst boss ever. They're not getting up in the morning trying to drag their feet on anything that's going to change, anything that's going to be new. They're doing that the way they do the rest of their lives, which is, it's one thing to really know something, and it's another to be able to put it into practice. So I have made it my life's mission to close this gap for organizations, and so today I want to talk to you about 2 things. One of them is just the most important leadership attribute, which is clarity. And then secondly, I want to talk about the anatomy of the brain and how that needs to be used in its proper way. And then we'll use something as an example that we all are familiar with, and that's meetings. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about meetings, and then I'll leave you with a couple of recommendations. When we are a new leader, one of our greatest opportunities is to be clear. And if leaders were clear, half the problems that we have right now day to day would be gone. I once was brought in on a project for a 4-person leadership team that was doing a national rollout, and they'd been together for a year and they weren't getting anywhere. And they literally shared cube walls. They laughed and they celebrated birthdays and they met and they were planning, and everything that they did for a year was collegial. And then they brought me in because they thought it was politics or it was the other people in the organization. And within a few days, I could see they lacked clarity. So I set up an activity and asked each of them to write down, well, what are the goals of this rollout? And when's and how's it supposed to happen, and what's your part? 4 people. Thick as thieves, 4 people. They laughed. They cried. 4 different answers. You know, at home, in your personal relationships, when you realize, wow, we were in that same conversation and we see it very differently. As a leader, you want to use your toolbox, and one of the things in your toolbox is you have to check. You can't just skate by. Now, if you don't check, you're going to make the assumption everybody's doing fine. They're not. I meet client after client, Fortune 500 companies, people that are written about in the newspaper, on the cover of Forbes. They are not being clear with their people, and their people don't have clarity, and they're suffering. They might even be making a lot of money, but they are not successful, and they're suffering. We need clarity. Once we put in place the systems and the processes for this 4-person team to check each other, it doesn't take any more money. It doesn't even really take any more time. It is what you're focused on. As soon as they put that in place, their traction went up and their items skyrocketed. Clarity. Okay, so let's say you get clarity in place. Because you know how important that is for every relationship that you have. It is a leader's most important attribute. Once you know how important that is, now you come to work and you say, okay, how do I get these people going in the direction that I need them to go? How do I get them to make changes? They've been here so long and they want to do things the same old way. Well, guess what? They're human. So all those people that you think are being resistant, or they're trying to sabotage, or they're just in the way, or they just want to loaf, it's actually the conversation you're having is with their brain. Just like the conversation you're having with your brain when you're checking on that New Year's resolution. So the brain has 60,000 to 100,000 thoughts per day. And pretty much all of those, it's doing it without you. The breathing I'm doing right now, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing my thinking, and I'm not doing my breathing. But when I want to think about something, what was that person's name, or which route am I going to take when I drive, or what gift am I going to get for this person, or what's an idea to help my business grow, that's me leading. Everything else, 99.9% of the day is autopilot. Wish that wasn't true, but it is. The body's keeping me alive, being prepared for danger. We're not where we were, but we're hardwired for that now. And so those people around your table, in your group, that work that you're trying to do as a leader, those changes you're trying to make, those are habits. And if you've read James Clear, Atomic Habits, or listened to him on podcasts, we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our habits. Wishing again that weren't true. I wish it was more complicated. I wish I could be paid to be brought in and be so fancy and so scientific. It's your habits. And here's an example of a habit. I'm going to floss more. Okay, so I get up the next day and I floss. Now I'm having to bore through the brambles of the well-worn pathway, the person that doesn't floss enough. And then now I have flossed today. And then I get up tomorrow to floss again, and the path grew over. I'm back to having to cut through the brambles. If you've heard of the 7 times 7 ways marketing adage, that's a brain thing. 7 times 7 ways. You keep talking about something, you show the brain a picture, you invite it to a meeting and have a conversation, you show a video, pretty soon the brain's like, fine, I see this is important, let me lean in. When you want to do better as a leader, you want to change your habits. It may seem like going to the gym is an obvious habit, but I'm telling you, the way you do your meetings, those are habits. The way you do performance management with your teams, those are habits. The way you communicate, the way that you bring clarity to the equation, those are habits. So when you say to me, well, Margie, we know about leadership, we've had all those classes, we've had those programs, we've brought in consultants, but I can tell you what happened is you got busy, and you went back to firefighting, and you took your eye off the ball, and you didn't have a consultant or a coach or somebody from HR that comes and hangs out with you day in and day out. What we do when I coach with executives and teams is we spend about 95% on the dance floor doing our thing. And I don't use case studies, we do the real work. But we spend about 5% of the time in this process up in the balcony observing. So let's say you've learned all the most important things about how to do a good meeting. And by the way, all that is settled too. You've heard it. You know a few things that you can do to fix your meetings. Forbes calls unproductive meetings an $85 billion problem in the US. I could come to your office right now and take 75% of the meetings off your calendar, and you would actually get better at the work that you're doing. this piece about the way that we do habits, so we're approaching this, and I could say, well, Margie, we tried that. It didn't work. We're right back to the old way. We've got all these recurring meetings. We've got all these people on these calls, and we're not getting anywhere. Why? Because of habits. So we do the meetings, and you need someone to observe, and you apply the logic, and you do your thing, but then you go up to the balcony. How many times have you actually paused in the middle of a meeting and say, how are we doing this meeting? How are we doing as the science of meetings? So there's a science of leadership, and there's a science of everything that you do throughout the day. If you can wrangle your clarity and manage the habits, you can make it happen. I'm going to close with a recommendation. So if you go to topteamaccelerator.com, there's an assessment out there, and you can even learn from the assessment the things that are really the most important things to focus on. You don't have to give your email. You don't have to, nobody's going to know your answers. Just walk through that and see what can it be to lead a high-performing team. And I will leave you with this. I think the world is a better place when leaders are leading better. That's something we all can do, and because it's possible, we want to go after that. Thank you for your time.